All right, here we are again.
Here we are again. Welcome, Professor.
Welcome, Prophet.
Thank you.
And today's show we're going to be talking about roles within a family.
Oh yes, a big one, big one. But roles within a family. Let's start off with roles that are decided for people, obviously the children in the family. It's one thing when a person decides their own role, but it's another thing when the role is decided for them. Obviously before they can talk and comprehend and make their own decisions.
It's interesting because the sibling order is important when it comes to roles. The oldest child compared to the middle child, and then say the younger child in a three-child family. Each of those children, I guess, assumes a different role, or a different role is fostered upon them by the upbringing of the parents based on their birth order. I guess one is more directed towards being the leader, and perhaps the second child sort of tries to, I guess, takes more of a background role, and the younger child's got something a little bit different in terms of their role.
Well, the first child is always the apple of the eye. You know, parents have only got eyes for them. It's a big step in their life, anticipation of the first child. Obviously the grandparents have got a big input into that, and this child from the word go, from the time it takes its first breath, and even before then, it can do no wrong. It's a wonderful place to be in life when you can do no wrong. Things will tend to work out for you a lot better. I mean, you'll have more self-confidence, there'll be more forgiveness with mistakes, and even big mistakes. Oh, well, you know, he has to learn, or you know, that kind of attitude. A totally different perspective is taken on the first child. The ones that are subsequent, second child in particular, by that stage of the game, the family's got its share of struggles, mortgages, finance, sleep deprivation, you know, with young children, those sort of things, just all the struggles of raising a young family. The second child usually has to shoulder that, even though very little of it's to do with them. The second child often becomes the scapegoat for everything that goes wrong in the family, the struggles. When things go right, you know, there's an old saying, you know, when the racehorse wins, it's the jockey, if it loses, it's the horse.
It's very interesting, and I guess different families have, I guess, got different dynamics, you know, depending on whether the kids, I guess, the boy child or a female child, whether the siblings are brothers or sisters, and the dynamics that occur. I guess if I know in my family, I'm one of three brothers and stepsister overseas, but you know, I grew up with two other brothers, and I'm sort of the oldest brother, the leader of the family. And it's interesting, I guess, you know, with friends of mine who I've seen who have been only child, and seeing how they've sort of grown up somewhat differently. They're sort of more outward focused towards other people.
Well, the only child, being an only child, I mean, you could do no wrong. No one to fight with. No one to have any power struggles with, sibling rivalry, could do no wrong. Parents are not going to go very hard on an only child when that's their only hope. The problem of roles within families only presents itself beyond the single child family, and it becomes exponential after two children. I myself come from a very large family. There's 8 children in the family. I'm the second oldest. I'm the scapegoat. What I've noticed in my own family is that, sure, you know, the oldest one could do no wrong. I was the scapegoat. The 5 below me, the 5 immediate ones below me were lost. They were neither the golden child nor the scapegoat. They were just completely lost. And of course the last one who came along, my sister, younger sister, she can do no wrong. She's the golden child. But what I find interesting looking back over the period of my life, and I'm starting to close in on 50 now, what I find very, very interesting is this only applies to the individuals for maybe the first third of their life. The remaining, we're at the 2/3 stage now, and the remaining 2/3 they invert, become the opposite of what the role that was decided for them in the beginning. Of course, there's always exceptions. There's many mixed aspects to their personalities, but by and large, this is what has happened.
Do you think it's because of things that happen within those people's lifetimes, experiences that they've had, that they sort of reflect on, and something happens with them internally to make that sort of switch occur?
Well, I guess the question you're asking is, did they find out that their belief system was wrong? And the answer to that is yes. It takes a long time, but eventually a person has to work it out for themselves that their belief system is faulted. It needs changing.
Well, see, it's interesting because the family that you're raised in, your parents attempt to instill their beliefs and their belief system upon you, or that's what I've seen in most families, including in my own. I guess it'd be the rare family that the mother and the father tries to guide the child to become who that child is going to be, say, without those parents, to try to say, okay, what do I see within this child? What's this child's strengths and weaknesses? And is this person going to turn out differently to what I want? Am I going to guide that child in terms of what I want them to be, or who they're probably going to end up being anyway?
Well, I think it gets back to a generational concept. Many parents try and instill a belief system into their children that might have worked with their generation, but the world is changing, it's changing faster than ever. And instilling a belief system in children based on old ways of thinking, I mean, it's pointless teaching a child how to ride a horse these days. Where are you going to ride a horse in the city? It's no longer an important issue, but however, you would need to instill in them a good belief system when it comes to driving in peak hour traffic, things like that. So I guess it gets back to the quality of the parenting. If the parents are brainwashing into their children, and it is brainwashing, if they are brainwashing into their children an outdated belief system, then they're doing a bad job. If, however, they are placing more focus on current issues and moving forward and what's going to be important in the next decade, or perhaps something like that, that's good parenting. That's preparing them for what's ahead of them. The concept of, back in my day, whenever I hear that expression, I just cringe. Back in my day, well, we can't go back to the days of slavery because it was once accepted. It's not acceptable today. And many of these issues come through in parenting. Having a child and raising them to go down the road and work in the local steel mill their whole life, and that's their role. This is not good. This is not good parenting. It's not even being a good person.
It's amazing. In my family, my father, he was 51 when I was born, and there was an 18-year age gap between my father and my mother, and he was born in 1929.
I guess she found herself a good provider.
She certainly did. And his parenting style, though, he brought me up with older sort of values, so to speak, very different values to those what I saw around me in my peer group. And everyone thought that he was my grandfather anytime that he sort of dropped me off at school and everything. So, but I guess I gained the wisdom of his experiences from the days of old. But in many ways it was a benefit to me, but in other ways it wasn't so much a benefit. I've had to relearn some things because some of those olden day rules no longer apply. That time has passed.
Absolutely, but it's like everything in life. You've got to be open to new ideas, broaden your horizons, open-mindedness. This is the best way of preparing yourself for the future and preparing yourself from harm, is to be open-minded and knowledgeable about what is going on around you, being self-aware. Placing people in roles is basically defining or trying to define a life they're going to live, and clearly it will extend way beyond these roles. It's going to affect their careers, their relationships, basically almost all of their decision making. And I don't think that's a good idea. I think people need to be themselves. I'm not saying you can give children the liberty to do what they want, eat what they want, say what they want. I'm not saying that at all. But telling them what to do with some sort of penal system if they dare to have their own thoughts, I don't define that as good parenting.
I'll tell you something. My father said to me at a young age, look, Clarke, you need to study hard, go to university, get a degree in a science or technology or mathematics subject, so one of the hard sciences, then go and work very hard, find a good job, a good stable job, and work very hard and work your way up. And I guess that has been my life. The things that he didn't tell me to do, however, are the things I've become most interested in the years since he passed away. And some people might call me a bit of a weirdo for doing this, but what I did, I made up a spreadsheet of all the things he raised me to believe, and then next to each of them I put down whether I believed it or whether I didn't, and the reasons why. There were a number of things on that spreadsheet that drove me to do certain things and go to certain places, including Thailand. And that, I guess, experience of discovering who I am, and not just what I can do, has been probably one of the best experiences of my life. But he hasn't been around for me to or interact with him, or for him to provide me with any feedback about how I've done with that sort of process. But I don't generally see other people doing that sort of stuff, trying to understand why they believe what they believe, and whether the things that they believe still suit their needs and the requirements in today's world.
Well, there's many things to think about there. Both you and I, our fathers have moved on, they've passed away, and as they say, when the father dies, the son can live. We are free to make our own decisions and be ourselves. I think if we were in the opposite situation, as in our fathers were still alive, I think we would have a very big struggle to be ourselves. There'd be constant judgments all the time.
I completely agree.
And that would take a lot of strength to swim against that tide. Because every time you go and sit down and visit your parents for dinner, it'll be, oh, we're disappointed, we're disappointed in you, you haven't turned out how we thought, and we raised you to be better than this. And you'll be faced with a difficult decision. Do I comply and, for peace sake, some people call that respect? Do I do things that I want to do, in other words, an element of deceit? Or do I just say, listen, quit it, I'm not interested in talking about this, I'll do whatever I want to do, you're going to have to accept it. And that would be, it would be unpleasant, to say the least. So, like I said, when the father dies, the son can live, the son is born. A man really comes into his own at that stage, and I'm sure there's many things that people miss about their fathers, but from my own personal experience, I just got tired of the pressure to comply. I've chosen a different road.
I think you're spot on what you say, and when I think of my father, I've really come into my own in the 15 years since he passed on. But I said to my mother a number of times now that I really don't think that he, if he was alive today, would like some of the things that I'm doing and some of the reasons that drove me to the things that I'm doing.
But it doesn't matter what he likes. It's your life. It's your life to make whatever decisions you want to make. Whether he likes it or dislikes it, that's something that he has to deal with, and that's something that he has to accept. I think good parenting in many ways is having sufficient secure thoughts to be able to say to your child, whether it be a son or a daughter, you're on your own, I trust you. You're on your own, you're free. You're free to be who you are, what you want to do, what you want to be, you're free. You don't have to answer to me. But, I put it to our listeners. How many people have heard those words from their father?
Well, I think the problem there, Steve, is that our parents want to continue on with the status quo. They are a certain way, they want to raise their kids a certain way, and it's in their self-interest to have
I think it's about the parents wanting to maintain power.
power and control.
Power and control always comes back to that, doesn't it?
In, I think it was the book, The 48 Laws of Power, there's something in there about the son slaying the overbearing father. About, if the father's achieved this or that in life, and the son perhaps takes a completely different direction. Instead of trying to best the father or one-up the father and achieve more in that particular area that the father's achieved in, the son goes in a different direction, something completely unexpected, and does either just as well or does very well and gains the respect of people within that industry or area.
Well, none of us have got anything to prove to our fathers, and once you can accept that, you can be who you really are. And I think that's the big lesson out of this discussion. You've got nothing to prove to anyone. Just be yourself. Everyone else is taken.
Yeah, so when I think about families, I think about the values and beliefs of parents. It can be very difficult for parents in some cases to accept children who turn out to be gay, or bisexual, or particularly transgender. And I see parents and children struggling with those sorts of issues, and
Big issue.
they really are. I mean, if as a father, I don't have any children, but if I was a father, and say I had a daughter that turned out to be say a lesbian, I'd have to start doing some research and reading up on how I'm going to sort of respond, interact, and make sure that I'm not advising or being an ogre or anything like that. It's something that I know pretty much nothing about. Raising kids and trying to guide them in a certain direction. I wouldn't want to be that kind of father to, be that overbearing type to, suppress that child. I want that child to turn out to be the best that they could be, given the way they are.
There's only really one thing to do, and that's not be judgmental. It doesn't matter whether a son or a daughter is happily married or chooses a different lifestyle, gay, or maybe even be single. As long as you're not trying to push your expectations on them and them having to do a deal with the devil and sacrifice who they are because they believe that they have to please you. There's really, good parenting is really nothing more than not judging.
I guess I would find that somewhat difficult because I'm the prototypical scientist, the INTJ, Myers-Briggs type, and that the J at the end is for judging, and it's part of my character. However, I've found that in my life I need to be less judgmental about pretty much everything and try to maintain an open mind, which I do as a scientist.
Well, the interesting thing is when I did a Myers-Briggs test, I was less than 1% judgmental, and the other three balanced out to about 1/3. And when I got thinking about this, I wasn't really surprised. I'm not a judgmental person. I'm very accepting, and I try and be very balanced in all the other aspects of my life. But this was really just the opposite of what I was exposed to in my childhood. To parents that did a terrible job, extremely judgmental, racist, the list goes on. And I can remember from a very young age thinking to myself, gee, I would rather die than be like that. And I made my decisions, and judgments is not who I am. It's not what I'm about. I don't pass any judgment on anyone for anything. In fact, I'm the opposite. I encourage people to go on their journeys and just be themselves.
Now, I'll tell you something interesting. There's a family in America called the most hated family in America. They're the ones who picket the funerals of dead soldiers with holding up signs like "God hates fags" and all the rest of that sort of stuff.
There is no God.
Well, thank God he made me an atheist.
I thank God every day for making me an atheist.
But I'll tell you something interesting. Now, I watched a documentary about this family, a number of them, in fact, and I actually got in touch with one of the members. And one of the members of the family, Nate, is his name, Nate Phelps. Now, this is the Phelps family. I contacted him for a couple of reasons. And firstly, he was a member of the family who escaped. He left the family. He didn't believe in their belief system, and he wanted out. And I contacted him and I said, look, Nate, Mr. Phelps, I saw you on a documentary, and it's my belief...
They sound like a bunch of neo-Nazis to me.
I tell you that they're called the most hated family in America, and you wouldn't believe the stuff that they've come out with over the years. But when I emailed him, he emailed me back. But what I said in the email, I said, look, I believe that you're a Myers-Briggs type INTJ, and the reasons why is because you're very independently minded. You've been raised in a family who's tried to point you in one direction. Your entire, or almost all of your siblings have turned out to share the belief system of your parents, but you haven't. And I'd be interested to know what your Myers-Briggs type is. Anyway, a couple of days later, he emails me back. He says, Clarke, did the test? I'm an INTJ. The INTJ is known for independence of mind.
That's right, independent thinking.
And I think that is...
and they're also known for logic.
This is it.
Hence they end up in careers based on science, chemistry, engineering, things like this. Anything to do with logic.
Yeah.
If you go to the opposite of the opposite end of the spectrum, they end up in areas like cults, religion. In other words, manufacturing their own logic. And this human beings, the only thing they do very well is manufacture their own logic. There's nothing more factual than delusion, and there's nothing more delusional than facts. And we have the ability to invent both if we need to. Is it better to be in denial about being delusional, or should it be delusional about being in denial?
It's very good. It's funny, when I think of if my father was alive today and he was looking at myself and my brothers, and I think that within a family, if one of the sons turns out to be different to the rest, if let's say that son is gay, bisexual, or on that spectrum, I think the scientists believe that there's benefits to the group. So in terms of evolution, the scientists say, well, okay, why did this trait evolve? How come this trait is still within?
Diversification.
Well, this is it. But they believe that
adaptation.
That's true. But there's benefits to the group. And if you think about it, if say one kid in the family turns out to be gay, and the rest is straight, the straight kids go on to have families of their own, but the gay kid is able to provide benefits to the group.
The gay kid will be there to look after his mother when she gets old.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And that's exactly what I was about to say, that that gay child is able to look after the mother and provide benefits to their to the straight kids as well, in terms of helping with the family, being there for when they need it, etc. So the scientists believe that there are those benefits to the group, which is very interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. because, and I've seen this in many families, whenever whenever some loving is needed, looking after the elderly mother, or consoling someone in a difficult chapter of their life, they always turn to the eccentric, whether they be gay or not. They turn to this person. When people feel that there's trouble on the horizon, some sort of power struggle or something like that, they suddenly befriend the strongest one of the group. This is why in the schoolyard, everyone's dad was a policeman. We find out later that they weren't, of course, but all the kids used to walk around saying, "Oh, my dad's a policeman." It's creating a world of delusional power, I guess you could say. And different family members are relied upon for different reasons at different times. And this goes beyond families. This goes also, this applies to circles of friends. In order for the circle of friends to be balanced, different people need to bring different strengths to the table, different skills to the table, different mindsets to the table. I mean, if they're all the same, not much is going to be achieved other than people agreeing with each other.
And that's why I guess diversity, we need to value diversity within groups of people. Different people bring different skills, different backgrounds,
different ideas
to the table.
Yeah.
And especially in areas where ideas are the greatest currencies, such as the technology area and industry, that's a valuable thing.
Yes. Human beings, we are very successful at commercialising ideas that are really one step behind where we are at as a society. We take an idea that was once considered dangerous, and over a period of time it becomes accepted, then it becomes commercialised, and then it becomes redundant. And most people are fairly good at making a success out of the commercialisation stage. It's only those that have got little self-doubt, a lot of belief in oneself, and also determination and passion and ingenuity, I guess, as well. Those are the ones that come up with the new ideas, and they don't do them. They don't do them for profit. They do them for the challenge of being able to make something or come up with something new. And once they've achieved that, it then gets handed over to the rest of the flock that commercialise it and consume it.
And it's funny, in my own life with my startup, that's the exact type of person that I am. I entered the startup, I put my ideas into code, worked with a small group of other programmers. The ideas got turned into code and into an end product. And at that stage we handed it over to another set of people to commercialise it.
There's no money in the startups though.
What's that?
There's no money being the innovator.
Well, that's a very good point. You want to be the person who is involved in the commercialisation so that you can benefit the most. I mean, innovation, we laud innovators. We say, isn't innovation a fantastic thing? And it is. But the reality is innovation is hard. It takes a long time. It can take a lot of money. It
takes a lot of failure too. And not giving up on that failure.
It does take a lot of failure, and it's especially important not to give up on it. Determination is the most important thing that I look for in programmers, more so than even their ability to code. Determination and the ability to work through frustration are the two things that I would look for specifically. If a person has got those traits, then I know that they're going to make a good programmer if they've also got the raw IQ to work in that area. So.
Yeah, it's the ability to stick it out.
Absolutely.
when everyone else tells you you're wasting your time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You just got to keep going at it. Now, that can be a hard thing to do with a startup. You can be doing things like that for years and still not get anywhere. But at the end of the day, the majority of startups are able to get a product or a service out there. And there is luck is a large factor when it comes to these sorts of things.
Got to have the right idea at the right time.
Absolutely. You know, there was many social networks before Facebook, you know, but look what happened to MySpace and Friendster and all the rest of them beforehand. And you also got to have the right people. And you know, Australia is it's far from the United States, and we don't have the ecosystem here that say the United States does to provide a crucible to provide that level of support to innovators. But one thing about innovation and failure is, to be a great innovator, you have to be willing to look bad and be embarrassed. Okay,
because that shouldn't be a problem for me.
It's not a problem for me, but I tell you, other people have made it a problem for me.
I've always been the one outcast and exiled, having my own thoughts.
And that's the other thing, you need to be able to be alone with yourself and spend a long period of time on your own.
Well, that gets back to your relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And how sound that is.
Yeah. You have to be able to work in solitude. You have to be able to be seen by other people as being crazy a lot of the time, because not many people would follow in the path that you've started. But I guess it has large effects on a person when they go out and they try these things. But I know in my life I've had some success, I've had some failure, but when it comes to this sort of stuff, I have to say, would I do another startup? I don't know. It's a real tough one. I don't think I'd want to be the innovator again like last time, because it takes too much of a it's just too difficult for a person to go through that.
I think everyone's got to be the innovator once, but it's important to learn from it. I think you learn a lot about yourself when you're the innovator. Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of ego involved. I did this, I achieved this, but I think it's a stage of life, and I think everyone has to go through it to be a complete person. Being an innovator is it's a very unnatural thing, because for the first time pretty much in your life, you're doing something because you believe in it. You're not doing it because someone is paying you to do it. And that really gets back to your belief in yourself. And often when no one else does believe in you, when everyone else is saying you're crazy, this is not going to work. I think it's a very important stage of life to go through, to teach you a lot about yourself. And not everything is based on money, of course. Almost everything is, but not everything is. And it's one of those few things that you can say, well, I did it, and I did it for my own reasons, and I didn't do it for the money.
Absolutely. And you know, one of my speeches about starting with why was a book by a bloke by the name of Simon Sinek, and he came out with this book called Start With Why, saying about the best way to present your ideas is say why, how, and what. It's only when you talk about the why of the idea that people will pay any attention. But you know, the whole thing about startups and businesses and roles in families, I think if you're, me being the oldest child within the family, I was always, you know, I went off and did a computer science degree. I was the one who was innovating. But you know, the rest of my family would look on and say, well, you know, I think Clarke's lost it. He's gone crazy. Look what he's doing now. He's tried this.
You know, to have lost it, that's based on the assumption that you once had it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that assumption is true.
Well, this is the thing. You know, I think the INTJ is seen as can be seen as the crazy scientist, and you know, some families aren't prepared for that type of sibling, especially if that sibling's different to the rest of them. But over time, that person needs to discover more about themselves and to help their siblings and their families see who they are, as well as who the family is as well.
Yeah, it's time for our listeners to to change with the times. Put away your astrology charts and do a Google search for Myers-Briggs. It will tell you more about yourself and those around you than their star signs will. I think it's interesting because a lot of people base their relationships on the star signs, and that is just well, it's manufactured logic and with no scientific basis at all. It's what you want to believe or what you need to believe, I guess. But you know, for your own curiosity, listeners, do a Myers-Briggs test. It's only going to take you 10 minutes. It'll answer a lot of questions about yourself.
And if you find out you're an INTJ, do let me know, because the INTJ is 1% of the population, and we feel a little bit lonely out there. But I'll tell you a quick story just before we wrap this one up, Steve. That one Christmas time I come to my family and I said, oh look, my Christmas gift to myself as well as to the family this year is this gene test. I went off and I've sent a swab back to this gene company, and they've analysed where my genes are from, and here's all the information. And I think my family was a bit aghast at that. My mother's interested in genealogy and family history, but to that level of, I think that's a little bit too out there for my family.
Okay, yeah. The moment we have some evidence and some facts, it could be a bit confrontational. Is that what you're saying?
I think it very much is.
But while we can make up a bit of the story and colour it up, we can accept it.
My mum was shocked when I come to her and I said, did you know that my genes originated on my mother's side from, see this fossil that they found some years ago? There was an article in the news about Otzi the Iceman, some fossil that was found frozen in the snow in some place. And if you look at the lineage of our genes, we share some similarities with that Iceman. So I guess sometimes families not ready for that sort of information. But that was an interesting one back in 2009, which I did. But look, I think we'll wrap this one up now. We've reached about
I've got an anecdotal one as well. I did the gene test as well, and it reassured me what I already knew. I'm not from this world.
Very good, mate. And we're going to leave it at that for this show, and we look forward to speaking to you next time on our next episode of the show. So
Yes.
Stay tuned.
Yes, thank you.
All right, see you later.